So today I'm going to show you just how I cook up simple dry beans in my Instapot with no soaking. This is a huge time saver if you're used to making beans traditionally. You can soak them. What that will do is, I think, reduce the tendency to upset your stomach, because you can rinse or soak them overnight and then drain off that liquid and start with new water. But we don't find it to be problematic, so I just cook them without soaking and it turns out beautifully. So I'll show you the very simple way I do that. So we just need an Instapot. We need dried beans. These are just from Walmart. Navy beans, my kids especially really like just white beans in general, cannellini, navy beans, things like that. And then this is one of my favorite kitchen tools. Once it's done cooking, I just clip this onto the edge of a pot. And it allows you to drain the pot without, dirtying up something else. It comes clean really easily. So it's just like a strainer that you can attach. I use that for pasta as well. So let's get started. I have just dumped the entire bag of beans, which is a 1 pound bag, into the Instapot. You can make whatever, amount you want. Then I'm just gonna take the insert out and I'm gonna fill it with hot water. I am using my 8-quart Instapot, which I've only had this one for about maybe a year and a half or so. I mostly use my 6 quarts. I have 2 6 quarts and 1 8-quart. But I actually really like the 8-quart for making the beans because it never makes a mess on the inside of the lid. My 6-quart pots, if I make beans in them, it tends to make a scum kind of on the top of the lid. It's not a big deal, it just rinses off, but it's the only kind of thing I make in the Instapot where it leaves the lid dirty, and it drives me a little bit nuts because I'm so lazy about it. So I'm just making sure these are really well covered because this is such a big pot, you don't need quite as much water. The trick with making beans in the Instapot is really use lots of water, more than you'd think, okay? So I'm using like probably, I don't know, this is probably about 2 inches of water, at least 1.5 inches, and this is a big pot. So I would err on really overfilling it. Just stop if you're using a 6-quart at where it says max line. You don't want to go above that. Okay, that is it. So I'm going to just lift this into my Instapot. I'll turn the camera off to that and show you the settings I use. Okay, so we just put the lid on, which you make sure it fits on nicely. Follow the signs, close by turning it all the way to the right. I make sure this is set to sealing versus venting. And it doesn't click or anything. You just turn it as much as you can to sealing. When this comes to pressure, this red button here will pop out of this Instapot. Sometimes, depends on the model you have, it'll just come flush. And it'll become so that you cannot turn and open the lid. So it's a very safe thing. So this is turned to the right, locked, and this is set to sealing. And now this is the only function other than yogurt that I use on my Instapots. I do not ever use any of these complicated things. So I just hit pressure cook. And for beans this size, like chickpeas and white beans, I do the same amount of time. It's about 45 minutes for me. We like our beans really nice and soft. You can experiment with what works for you. So this will now come to pressure, heat up, come to pressure, cook for 45 minutes. I let it naturally pressure release. This Instapot, because it's the 8-quart, takes a very long time to pressure release, especially when there's a lot of liquid in it, like I just did. So I would expect it to take, honestly, nearly an hour to pressure release. If I do this and turn off the keep warm function, it'll obviously release more quickly. So I'm going to do that just to save a little time, but I'm not in a rush, so I'm just going to let this naturally pressure release. If you want to force the pressure release, I would wait 10 minutes, and then what you can do is with your hand very carefully on this side, because the steam is going to shoot out of there and it can really burn you. You can just turn it to venting, and this shot of steam will come out until it's fully released. The reason I almost never do that, I'd rather leave time for it to naturally pressure release, is that number one, it makes a mess usually on the bottom of your cabinets, and I don't think it's great for my cabinets. Also, it tends to blow the food to smithereens inside the pot, I find. I find it like kind of, I don't know, it just blows it apart. Even something as like hearty as beans. So I just really prefer to naturally pressure release it. So I'll show you these when they're all fully cooked. Okay, so It ended a while ago. The reason it says end and isn't counting up is because I had turned off that keep warm function. So it did take a while to pressure release, but this is now down. No steam coming out of here, and I can easily open it. So I just turn it to the right fully, following that sign, open, lift it off, and see the lid is just full of steamy water, but there's no foam or anything on the top. And those are my beans. So what I'm going to do is with some oven mitts, I'm going to lift this out. I'll attach this and drain it. All right, so I'm going to try and show you how this clips on, because it really is pretty clever. So you clip it on. This is a thick pot, the thickest one I have. So it's, you do have to kind of force it on there, but it has these clips. It works really well. You have to make sure it's tucked inside the lid. And then I can take this and just tip it, and it holds the beans in, but the liquid's out. So I just really like it because you don't have to dirty one more thing. And this silicone, you know, the thing I just clipped on, it's super easy to clean versus like putting into, you know, a mesh sieve of some kind. So I really like this. So finish draining this completely. I try to get all the liquid out because it seems to keep better in the fridge. And then I'll just show you how I scoop it into containers and kind of the finished texture of beans that I've cooked in the Instapot. All steamy. Okay, but this is what they look like. They're nice and soft. We like them this way, but you could certainly cook them less if you don't like them that way. My kids are primarily the white bean eaters. I do throw them into recipes sometimes that we all use, but or that we all eat, I should say. I'm sorry. But generally, these are literally just for eating. They just throw some hot sauce on or some Mrs. Dash, and like that's really yummy to them. So 1 pound of beans, I typically dole them into 4 of these Pyrex containers, and then I'll let them fully cool. Whatever's not eaten today, I'll just toss in the fridge for leftovers that my kids reheat whenever they want them. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and leave a comment below if you have a different way of cooking beans in the Instapot.